Yo, what is up guys? Nick Nakai here, Let's Drift Media. Thank you for coming back to the channel. So on today's episode, I'm going to be doing kind of a little how-to video on this 2006 Lexus GS300. Today we are going to be replacing the automatic transmission unit. This is a rear wheel drive Lexus. Customer brought it in, said he had a couple shops look at it and everyone was recommending a transmission. They were trying to rebuild it. He just wanted to put a used one in, so that's what we're doing today. Pulled the scan tool out. I did drive it. It did drive fine, but it was throwing a bunch of codes while I was driving it. But customer said that he wasn't able to get like past 40 miles an hour. It just wouldn't shift. It was doing all kinds of weird stuff, and it had a bunch of shift codes, shift solenoids stuck on, off, etc. We'll go ahead and put those up. So we're just gonna go ahead and do the transmission because that's what they asked for, and it should fix the problem. So first thing recommend doing is disconnect the positive terminal on the battery. Next, you're gonna wanna drain out the old transmission fluid, which will be this, 14 millimeter drain plug right there. Let all the fluid come out. This shift linkage is up on here by this little 12 millimeter nut. Go ahead and pop that nut off. Then you kind of just wiggle this shift linkage out. Over there, it did have this little brace and little plastic undercover, which is all right here. The under plastic carriage cover was just 10 millimeter bolts right up in here. It was 4, I believe, and then that little carriage member was just to the exhaust, the cats on each side, and then it had two 14s here. So pretty self-explanatory. We are going to remove this bolt here as well as the other pipe bolt because we're going to be dropping this whole Y exhaust. So coming down here, we're going to have to remove this little bracket, 4 more 12 millimeter bolts. Coming to the back is where the exhaust meets up to the muffler piping, 14 millimeters on each side. So we're going to remove all that. We're going to drop this exhaust, get it out of the way, and then we also got to disconnect the drive shaft. So back here, looks 14 millimeter nuts and bolts. Might be able to get them all here. We might have to put the vehicle in neutral to rotate it, put it back in park so we can loosen these drive shaft bolts. And there should probably be a center support brace holding the drive shaft in the center somewhere. That's probably a 2-piece drive shaft. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do right now, is go ahead and pop this exhaust off, get some more access so we can actually see the whole transmission, and go from there. Let's get started, yo-yos.
Bien enfuscados, pacas ganando con la diablona, bien alterados, collas el mano y bien cambiado, con Louboutin Dolce Gabbana traigo, con la pacada nunca falla pa'l peligro, en mi negocio generando y desde chico, con un porte bien tumbado, así es como la navego, ya se la saben todos quienes aquí el mero mero.
So we got the exhaust pretty much disconnected, minus that bracket that's holding it down. Forgot to mention, disconnect the O2 sensor. It creeps up into the floorboard, and you can literally just stick your fingers under here, pull the carpet back just enough, and you can see right there that gray wire running up. We'll probably have to disconnect it from there, and then we will disconnect it right here, pull it out, and feed the wire down. Same thing on the driver's side. So I already got the driver's side out. I did have to like shove a screwdriver in the hole going through the floorboard to lift the carpet up enough to pull the connector out without ripping on it too hard. You can see this is the passenger side. Go ahead and disconnect it and we'll pull it out of here. And then this exhaust is ready to drop down as soon as I take off this bracket.
Al tiro y bien pendiente, ya se la saben que pedo. Mi cara no la muestro, bajo perfil me la llevo, 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 me la llevo.
All right, we got our heat shield shields off. All we gotta do now is disconnect these two center support members and the 4 drive shaft bolts, and we'll be able to pop this off and we'll slide the drive shaft out of the transmission. Again, make sure the transmission is drained so you don't have a bunch of fluid coming out.
Agradecido con mi Dios que está conmigo. A mi familia, madre mía, yo la cuido. Le doy topón a todo aquel que quiera un tiro. La clica siempre se deja caer en 5. Con la clica patrullando el comercio se está dando. Que no falte el Rolexito siempre puesto en mi mano. Unos cuantos monos ya los traigo a mi mando. Siempre andamos de negro por si querían preguntarlo. Bien enfoscados, pacas ganando con la diablona bien alterada.
Alright, so we got the exhaust off, we got the heat shields off, we got the drive shaft off, plastic covers. There's the new trans. This is pretty much what you should have now at this point. I went ahead and rethreaded the drive shaft bolts into the drive shaft so we don't lose them. And these are just all for the heat shields. I'm going to take a peek underneath. Would recommend putting a drip pan when you pull the drive shaft. A little bit of fluid came out, so was able to capture that. But yeah, now the back's all clear and exposed. Really just gotta hop in there now. We're gonna leave these on till the very end. Once we actually drop the trans, this will come with the transmission because this is what's holding it up in the back. So we are gonna have to remove the starter next. There's an electrical clip-on connector, that black connector up there. This thing will focus. And then there should be a 12mm nut to the positive battery cable. And on the back, should have two 14mm, one right there and one above that little hump on the transmission. And that should be holding the starter in. I mean, I guess technically we could just unbolt it and let it sit down here. We don't have to disconnect it and actually remove it because it can just sit right there. So I think I'm just gonna unbolt it, push the starter out so it's just chilling on the engine side. That way we're clear on the transmission side. There is an electrical connector for the main harness right there. You pull that white tab down towards the driver's side and you should be able to push it up. There are some plastic clips holding the harness to the transmission, which we will have to take those off as well. There's another electrical connector right up there. Any little brackets holding the harness, we might just take off the nut, that bolt, if it's easier, but we'll see. But besides that, the bell housing bolts, start taking all those off. And actually I lied because probably gonna have to get the torque converter bolts through this starter hole, so we will have to pull the starter out of here to give us room to get the torque converter bolts. I don't think there's another access hole. Nope. There is like coolant line or something right there bolted to the transmission. We'll have to undo that. Oh, that's the transmission cooler line. Not too sure if I'm going to disconnect these hoses or just unbolt the trans cooler. These two 12s right here. On this side, a couple more electrical connectors, plastic clips we'll have to undo. This shift linkage should be fine just sitting there. We'll see later on once we go to actually pull it. But yeah, really from here it's just remove the starter, remove all the torque converter bolts from the starter hole, disconnect this trans cooler, disconnect the harness, and once we get all those bell housing bolts off, which should be fun, way better than a front wheel drive though, get the trans jack and we should be ready to drop it. Hopefully we can drop it before the sun goes down, which I think we can. It's around 5:40 right now, so let's keep going. Alright, well, we got the starter out. It was just those two 14s on the back of it, and then you have to disconnect the electrical connector, and then there's also a 12mm to the positive cable, which is this guy right here. won't focus, sorry guys, but it's right above the push-in connector. So you squeeze that connector, pull it out, then pop this plastic cover. There's a 12 right here. And now we have access to the torque converter bolts. This is probably the worst part of doing any transmission, because we will have to rotate the crankshaft clockwise until we can get access to those bolts. Focus. So you can see one in there kind of hiding. So we'll have to rotate the crank a couple degrees to get access to that bolt right up in there. And there should be, I think there's 6. I'll check the new one. Toyotas usually have 6 bolts. So there is a plastic cover too that sits in this little slot right here. You just pull that out. Don't forget to put it back in. And yeah, so we're gonna rotate the crank, try and get a ratchet on there and pull out those bolts and repeat 6 times till we get each bolt off. So yeah, I was correct. 6 bolts on the torque converter. This is the starter hole. So we're basically trying to get a ratchet right in here, crack them loose, probably then use the electric ratchet, get them off, rotate the crank to the next hole, get that bolt, take it off, do it again, rinse and repeat 6 times. And you can also see the torque converter bolt pattern right here, or the transmission bell housing bolt pattern. 1 bolt here, 1 bolt here, 1 bolt here, most likely 1 here. These are the 2 bolts that hold the starter in if you are still on the vehicle. A couple more down there, and yeah, a couple more here. This one still has the trans cooler attached as well as the shift linkage. I'm gonna unbolt this, trash this, and just use the shift linkage that's on there. And see, we got the tabs to hold the wire harness still on here, and even some sensors, so it's pretty cool. Usually they just rip a lot of that stuff out. But yeah, this is an overview of what the transmission looks like when it's out of the vehicle. It is kind of nice to have to reference upon removal, so you kind of know what you're looking at. And we will be replacing the tail housing, extension housing seal, as well as the rear main crankshaft seal. Since we're going to have it out, it's recommended. Don't cheap out on that. So yeah, let's squeeze our arms in there to get these torque converter bolts off. Yeah. Okay, well I found a much better way to get to these torque converter bolts. Go ahead and pop this bottom cover for the oil filter housing. That way you're down here. I got tired of running up there to check, double check, see. Position the starter kind of like this. Oh, my face. Just kind of down out of the way, because I was not able to really get a ratchet from this angle. Instead, I use this 3-foot 1/2 inch to 3/8 adapter. Just fed it underneath the sway bar. It's going to be impossible to show you guys, but it'll go all the way to the torque converter bolts. And then I just hit it with the impact, zapped them off, rinse and repeat. So, recommend doing it that way. Torque converter bolts out. If I was you, I would recommend using a magnetic socket so the bolts don't fall down, because a couple times the bolts are getting jammed between the flywheel and the transmission case. I can see them in between where they mate, so I had to kind of mess around with it, go backwards a little bit, go forward, but not recommended. Recommend you take the bolts out with you, so that way you have nothing fighting you when you're trying to turn the crank from down here. So Now, basically gonna start undoing the bell housing. Might unbolt this bracket and put a jack underneath it. That way I can lower it down to give me more access to the upper bolts, as well as free up some space up top to disconnect all the electrical connectors. So we got all the bell housing bolts out. The bottom like 4 or 6 are all 14 millimeters. Going up to the top though, they're all 17 millimeters up there. It's horrible. Sorry guys, I'm trying my best to show you guys everything, but we got the harness disconnected, undid all the plastic clips, disconnected it on both sides. If I can put the light here. Went ahead and disconnected the 3 bolts that hold this cooler on. I'm just gonna let this hang here by the hoses because the upper hose kind of looked a little difficult to get to. So wasn't sure if I was gonna be able to get to that. I'm putting on manual focus. Yeah, but this thing had 3 bolts on it. That's free. I was able to get the other 17s. There's one there, there's one behind this cooler, and there's one at the very, very top, which definitely not gonna be able to show you guys. But now that everything's pretty much disconnected, the trans is only held on by this plate right here. So I'm gonna put a jack under here to hold it up, take off these bolts, and split the transmission and try and bring it back enough to clear the subframe right here, because you can see the bell housing is sitting in front of that. So hopefully that doesn't give me any problems. And yeah, let's drop this trans, call it a day for tonight. Guys, so we did not beat the sun. Unfortunately, I got hungry, so I had to put this on hold, but we got the trans out. It came out very easily. The trans jack, I was worried it wasn't going to have enough height clearance, or the vehicle wasn't going to have enough height to pull it out, but it was just enough to pull it out, lower it, and slide it through. You guys saw. So next, what we're gonna do is, since we have the transmission out, I recommended we just replace the rear main seal. If you're at this point, you might as well, because if that seal, crankshaft seal behind this flywheel starts to leak, you're gonna have to pull this transmission back out again just to replace it. So if you are here, just replace the rear main seal. We're gonna pop off those, look like 14 millimeter bolts holding the flywheel. This plate in the front most likely then the flywheel, then most likely another plate in the back. So pay attention how it comes off. Make sure you reassemble it the exact same way. So I'm gonna go ahead and zap those bolts off, pull the flywheel out, and pull that rear main seal off. And tomorrow I'm gonna pick up the seals and reassemble it. So I'm gonna stop this project for tonight. All right, so we are back, day 2. Got the rear main seal, the new one. Here's the old one. Usually get these out, I'll drill a hole, then get like a pick, kind of try and pry it out. Coming underneath, got the flywheel off, and of course the rear main. Just gonna lightly oil this around the edges. Hopefully this one's the right size. And then yeah, I'm gonna tap it on. Usually if you don't have the special tool, I just use a 3/8 extension and a mallet and kind of gently tap all around till it just bottoms out. So that's what I'm gonna go ahead and do. Then I'm gonna reinstall the flywheel. Here's that disc underneath I was talking about. There's a little dimple. Make sure that goes back inside this hole, or else you will have problems. So make sure you put it back the same way it came out, guys. Actually, I'm just gonna have to swap out this mount, put it on the other one. I guess I could do that later, but really didn't swap much stuff over. I'm just gonna leave these sensors. If I have a problem, I'll just pop them off and reuse the old ones, but I'm just gonna go with it. Swapped over this breather hose, and yeah, we'll use the torque converter that came with it. This is for the cooler. I got the bolts ready, lined up. Just gonna place this on the trans jack. Hopefully I can get that on there and slide it back in the reverse order. Start feeding the bell housing, hopefully get it to line up. Helps to lube the torque converter snub to go in a little easier. And yeah, just start feeding in the bolts and bolting the bell housing back up. Alright, well, this trans lined up super easy. Literally just slid right in, didn't have to fight it, didn't have to wiggle it around, it literally just went right back in. Was able to get the two 14s on the bottom aligned, just drove those in, made sure it's flush all around the bell housing, put the mount on, and yeah, now just gonna finish putting all the bell housing bolts around. Put the torque converter bolts in through here, which is gonna suck, and plug in the harness. Just pretty much go in the reverse order that we started with. One thing to note too, when you go to put the torque converter bolts in, you will notice you get one black bolt. You can see right over the threads, it's a little thicker than just these, or just a bolt. You're supposed to start with this one. Use this one first. Tighten it all the way. It'll center the flex plate with the torque converter, so that way the rest of these will go in. If you start with one of these first and tighten it, you're gonna run into problems when you go to thread the next ones in. It's gonna be slightly off and you can risk cross-threading the torque converter. So start with the black one. Alright guys, so we are about done with this transmission replacement. Went ahead and got all the torque converter bolts in. Got the starter bolted back up with those two 14s. Just really now got to drain or fill it with fluid. There is a 24 mil bolt right here, which is the fill port. which I might have lost. This was a used transmission, but I went ahead and dropped off this drain plug and probably pulled out like about a quart or so. So I recommend just getting rid of any fluid in there just to be safe. This is the check port, so we will be taking this off once we get the car running. I'm gonna go ahead and put like 3 or 4 quarts in through this right side and that 24 mil hole. Again, this is what the bolt looks like. It even says WS, which stands for World Standard Transmission Fluid. Make sure you guys use the factory stuff. Don't cheap out and buy some AutoZone crap fluid. Get Toyota World Standard. For anyone going back together, because I kind of confused myself, it goes drive shaft first, then the heat shields, then the exhaust, and then that bar bracket down there, which holds the exhaust up. There also is that bracket that holds the drive shaft up in case it were to fall down, and then this piece goes on last. This is to help hold the little plastic undercarriage, which we'll install later. Don't forget to tighten the rear drive shaft bolts and the center support drive shaft bearing, which on this one had a washer on one side and a washer on the other side of the bearing plate. The exhaust is bolted back up. We got the bracket on. Really not bad. Honestly, this transmission really slid in super nice and easy. I did not really struggle at all to line it up. It was a lot nicer than I was expecting, but again, always a lot more difficult on the floor. But anyways, now we're gonna pump up some fluid and start it up, see what happens.
Bien enfuscados, pacas ganando con la diablona, bien alterados, collas el mano y bien cambiados, con Louboutin Dolce Gabbana traigo, con la pacada nunca falla pa'l peligro, en mi negocio generando y desde chico.
Alrighty. So we are key on right now. This is the Ansel V6 Pro, which is super sick. They sent me this a while ago and it's still my favorite bidirectional scanner, mainly because it's wireless and it doesn't require you to update it every other time you want to use it, like Xtool, before it gets bricked. I haven't updated this in over a year, but went ahead and went to the transmission computer in here. We're going to go ahead and reset the memory to reset any learned values. Go ahead and let that do its thing. After that, we're going to fire it up. Let it get to operating temperature. Meanwhile, we're going to shift through each gear. We're going to sit in park, sit in neutral, reverse, drive, go through all the manual, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think it's a 6-speed. And back through all the way back to park, and we're just going to let it idle and get to operating temp. We'll view the live data to make sure the trans is warming up, and then we're going to go pop down underneath again and pull that Allen out, that check port, and set the fluid level. So hopefully I put enough. I usually will run it through all the gears and run down there and check to make sure that I have enough fluid and some's coming out at least. If you have some coming out already, as soon as you pop that plug, you're good, because as it warms up, temperature, fluid level will rise. Alright guys, so you see that? Ended up having to add another 2 quarts in order to get it to flow out, so we were a little low. Luckily I was able to just add a couple more quarts. So once you get it to operating temperature, pretty much this dribble, that's how much you want coming out. That's pretty much how you set the level on any non-dipstick Toyota transmission. So I'm going to go ahead and plug it up, put the fill port screw back on, and we should be good for a test drive. And that's a wrap, guys. We got the car back on the floor. Set all the PSI. Tire light's still on though, so not too sure what's going on with that. But no check engine light. We should be good to go, so we're just going to give it a good test drive. Of course, I still need to put some of the panels on underneath, but I need to do the oil pan on this vehicle as well as the spark plug still, so it's far as tonight's job, we're calling it quits, so go give it a good test drive. Let me know if you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns in the video. Again, I didn't really show too much going back together since it's the exact opposite reverse order of taking it apart. So I try to show you guys as much as I can of that. It is a little bit difficult doing it on the floor, but overall not that bad. I'm probably 7-8 hours into this job, not including going to get parts, get the wrong parts, etc. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll catch you guys later. Peace!